It's no secret that I love using Autofac for dependency injection in C#, because historically, it's done this one thing a lot better than I've seen IServiceCollection do for my applications. Hi, my name is Nick Cosentino, and I'm a Principal Software Engineering Manager at Microsoft. Historically, using Autofac means that I can do assembly scanning. That means that when I want to build plugin-style architectures, I can dynamically load everything I need to from the bin directory without having to worry about changing my core application. Now, historically, IServiceCollection does not afford us this ability to do assembly scanning, but in this video, we're going to look at a NuGet package called Scrutor that's going to help us get this capability. I'm going to walk us through the differences between Autofac and how Scrutor can help us in this particular situation. So if you find this kind of content interesting, remember to subscribe to the channel and check out that pinned comment for my courses on DomeTrain. With that said, let's go to Visual Studio, look at Autofac, look at Scrutor, and see how these things compare. Alright, to start things off, on my screen I have an example program that's currently a little bit of a mess, but I'm going to walk through what's currently there and where I'd like to head to, and that's going to show us how Scrutor and Autofac compare when it comes to doing assembly scanning. The way that we're going to start this thing off is by basically doing our own assembly scanning here in terms of finding the assemblies that we're interested in. I did want to call out that this is a bit of a naive approach, but what this code does is it's going to look in the running directory for all of the DLL files. It's just blindly going to try and load those assemblies up, and then we're going to put that into an array. There are some concerns here, like you don't want to try and load unmanaged DLLs. You want to make sure you trust the DLLs you're working with. There's a whole lot of consideration that you probably want to have in production, but this is just for demo purposes. Now, what we're going to do from there is go through the Autofac example. So in Autofac, the way we set up our dependency container is by using this container builder, and then we have this ability to call register assembly modules. And that means that all of the modules, which I'll show you in just a moment, from any assembly that we were scanning in, we'll go register those modules. And that means when we look at the modules, we can see all of the different registrations per module, and those automatically get pulled in. This is kind of like a one-liner that gets all sorts of registrations from the places that we're interested in. From there, we ask to go build the container. You can optionally make a lifetime scope like I've done here, and then we can go resolve the service that we're interested in. So in this case, we're going to be looking at a service. It's very basic. It's just called IMyService, and it's going to have a concrete implementation just called myService. And from there, we can go pass in some string that we want to go get output to the console. If I go run this example application, it's very, very simple. And you'll see from Autofac example printed out to the console because it is a very simple app. So there we go. There's the output of running this one, right? So that output really just comes here from line 29. Now, what's really cool about this, and I will be able to show you this in just a moment as we get through this video, is that I can move the module that we have in this code that does the registration completely outside of the application, and this will all still function accordingly. So to show you what I mean by that, if we go look at the module, which is going to be down here, you can see I have this module defined from line 64 through 73. We can see that it's an Autofac module. The way that you operate these is by overriding the load method, and then you use the builder to go do the registration that you're interested in. In this case, I'm just registering the type called myService as the interface that it implements, and then saying that it's going to be a single instance. That means when other people try to resolve it, they get the same instance coming back. We are able to go now move this out to a whole new project, and as long as that DLL that gets built from that project gets put into the folder where we're running from, nothing will change. And in my opinion, that's a pretty powerful thing. I'll touch on this more as we get towards the end of this video, but I want to now compare how this works with IServiceCollection. And it's going to highlight one of the downfalls, or at least one of the shortcomings of IServiceCollection in its current state, and how Scrutor will help us. And this is just a brief interruption to remind you that I do have courses available on DomeTrain focused on C#. So whether you're interested in getting started in C#, looking for a little bit more of an intermediate course focused on object-oriented programming and some async programming, or are you just looking to update your refactoring skills and see some examples that we can walk through together, you can go ahead and check them out by visiting the links in the description and the comment below. Thanks, and back to the video. The way that we typically see this with IServiceCollection, it's very similar, right? We have a service collection that will create kind of like the Autofac container builder, but one big difference is that we end up having these extension methods that we go write. So this add my services method is an extension method. I've just jumped down to the definition. Let's go make this a little bit easier to see vertically. From there, we're going to add the scoped my service. We don't need to use that. We can do add singleton if you want, whatever you want for your registrations, right? We can go do that right in here, but we're using extension methods instead of the Autofac module approach. So if we go back up and look at this code that's getting run on the service collection example, we go call this extension method that will do the registration for us. We then ask to have the build service provider method called and get the service provider out of that. Then from there, we can go resolve dependencies. So if you were to compare the two methods that you see on screen right now, they're very, very similar. But like I said, one of the fundamental differences is that this one is going to be asking all assemblies that are passed into it, hey, all assemblies, go do all of the registrations from your modules. What's different about the service collection one is that if we have more modules we want to go work with, that means you need to go add more extension methods. The more things that you want to have loaded in from what would seem like modules, you need to have extra calls like this. Obviously, they wouldn't be the exact same method name. You might have, different names for all these things. Probably a lot better than just giving them numbers. But the point is that this code exists in your core application. And if you want to extend your core application, you now have to go touch the code inside of your core application to go add more extension methods, to go add more code to existing extension methods. But the point is you are touching your core application. This might not be a big deal at all for you. You might say, yeah, I'm touching my core application because I'm touching it all the time to add features. One of my design philosophies is that I try as much as possible to have a very lightweight core application and push things out into different features or different plugins, or you might call them something like a vertical slice. Just a personal opinion about how I like to develop software, and that means that I try as much as possible to have a lightweight entry point to my whole application. That means that I don't want to be adding more extension method calls, more extension methods in general to go register things. So now that you have that framing, one of the challenges that we have here, like I said with the service collection, is that by default, it does not have assembly scanning. But that's where Scrutor comes into play. So if I go check out the project file here, you can see that I've added Scrutor as dependency. By the way, I have no idea if I'm saying Scrutor right. I don't know if it's Scrutor. I don't know if it's Scrutor. I'm kind of trying to go in the middle. If you happen to know the right way to say it, try to sound it out in the comments for me and I will do a better next time. But when I live streamed about this, I think it was one of the most awkward things I was trying to pronounce. So props to the creator of this for making my life difficult. Also props to the creator because this is super cool because it gives us this Autofac scanning ability that we could see in the example right up here. So how this works is that instead of doing this, having the extension methods, we can call this scan method. Now, Copilot has written a bunch of code already, and I wasn't planning for that. But basically, if I go press tab, we can kind of take advantage of something like this. It's not exactly what we want, but I will try to massage this so it's the code that we need. If we have a quick read through from what Copilot put on the screen, it's saying scan from calling assembly. That's not exactly what we want because I want to give it a list of assemblies. And I think Copilot probably didn't know that I have that list, right? So if I were to go pass in the assembly array, just like this, we should be able to go ask Copilot to recreate this code. So I'll do that in just a moment. But you can see that we can then add classes. This one is specifically saying, just go look for the things that say I, my service. Maybe that's something you want. In my case, a lot of the time how I write code, I want to pull in all of the types that are defined in those assemblies. And then we have as implemented interfaces, which is very much like what we saw in the Autofac module. So if I scroll back down, literally as implemented interfaces is highlighted right here, just like we have in Autofac. And then we have singleton lifetime. We could change this up a little bit because depending on how you like to write code, you can do as self with interfaces. If you don't have interfaces slapped onto every single class that you have, and there's not a good reason that you should, most of the time I do, and I do that because of how I like to unit test, personal opinion, you don't need to go have the interfaces. Probably as self will work for most of what you have. Or if you're like me, with interfaces will work for most of what you have. And of course, there's this hybrid that gives you a little bit of both worlds. What I'm going to change up here is that we don't want this particular code. We want to pull in everything. So I'm going to go get rid of this and see if Copilot will do a better job, because I love testing Copilot, especially live when I'm recording this stuff. There we go. Much better. But we don't want add classes still. I think we can just do add classes. What this will do instead is we will go get all of the assemblies that are passed in. We will go add the classes, so every type will pull in. I want to do as self with interfaces and with singleton lifetime scope. This is nice. It's going to give us the functionality we want, and we can probably trim this up a little bit. This is just a stylistic thing. So there we go. Kind of get this link looking syntax, right? Overall, this should now give us the ability to go scan assemblies just like we had with Autofac. That means up top here, if I go put in this service collection call, we will need that. And I think for the most part, we'll have this working. So what I want to do is show you that if we go start refactoring code to go make plugins, we won't have to touch any code at all inside of these example methods. So I want you to think about Autofac example and service collection example as your core applications for this particular situation. That means if we want to change or extend functionality, I don't want to have to touch either of these. That's one of the takeaways here. That's one of the goals when I'm designing software that I like to have. If I go run this, we should hopefully see that both of these examples just work. And they do. So we can see that nothing too exciting, but we have the Autofac example running and the service collection example running. If you didn't believe me that we're not using this anymore, let's go ahead and delete it, right? I'll go run it again. I just want to show you that the Scrutor part is truly working. There's no more extension method call, and the Autofac stuff was still working. From here, what we want to be able to do is go make a plugin. That's part of the goal of this. So I want to show you that we can pull out the module and then we can go have the other code running. And I'm going to show you two different ways that this would work, depending on if you're using Autofac or if you're using Scrutor. This is also going to be the thing that may start to push me more in the direction of using IServiceCollection and Scrutor, but I need to get over that muscle memory of using Autofac. So the first plugin we're going to make is the Autofac specific one. So let's go ahead and add a new project. Okay, so what I've done so far is I've made a new project that we're going to have as our plugin. I've moved the module code from the core application out into this plugin because this is where this would need to live if we were building a plugin-based application. And you can see that I'm going to register my service as the implemented interfaces and also make it a singleton. So same thing, I just moved it out, and we're going to go look at my service, and I'm going to call out one problem that I didn't address before making this project. Very simple to solve, but my service is the same code, literally just moved it over here. We would have this in our plugin. So this is where the implementation would exist, but the problem that I didn't address before doing this is that this plugin and the core application need some common thing that they can refer to. And that way, when we want to go resolve things out of the plugin, and when we want to go implement them in the plugin, we can still refer to the same interface or type that we want to be able to resolve. So what I'm going to do is add yet another new project. This one is going to be able to be the, call it like the SDK. And what I'm going to do with the SDK is take the my service part. I'm going to pull that into the SDK. Again, I'm showing you this as a very quick example. You would probably want to put a little bit more thought into the APIs, your dependencies, and how you're structuring that with plugins. But this is just to make this stuff compile so you can see these things in comparison. my service is now in the SDK, and that means that our plugins should be able to work with the SDK. So we'll add that reference. That means if we go over to here, we can now get that to compile. So if I right click, I can go build that plugin. Excellent. This is going to be the Autofac one that we're interested in, but I still want to go do the same thing with Scrutor. So let's go do another plugin. And for this other plugin, we're going to do the same thing where we need to reference the SDK because our plugin will need to know about that interface. So we'll go ahead and add that. This is going to be the same plugin. So I'm just going to copy and paste that code over to here. The point that I want to also call out is that you wouldn't be doing this in general, having two identical plugins. We're only doing this because I'm sort of comparing these two different ways to do plugins in the same application. So please don't be confused by that. You wouldn't be literally copying and pasting these two things and having two of what should be the same plugin. It's just for showing you this example. The cool thing is that with Scrutor, this is all we have to do. I don't need a module. If we go look at the Scrutor plugin, you can see that it depends on the SDK, but no other NuGet packages. Autofac was similar, but it needs this NuGet package. So this is one of the things I will circle back on as pros and cons, but the My Service class is the only thing we need to have in this Scrutor plugin now. Let's go back and make sure that our core application is cleaned up, because there's probably a couple of things that I broke by doing that, and that will be this My Service. I need to make sure that I have the SDK added. So we'll add that. We will add the using statement at the top. And now both of these work. But there is one more trick. If I go run this now, there is no DLL in the bin directory that will get loaded in and have anything that has IMyService. So if we go run this, it will crash. But I want to show you this first so that you can see it working after. It's almost like TDD, kind of. You can see that it didn't work. Right? It's unable to find IMyService, right? It says nothing has been registered for that. That's okay. So we'll have the Autofac one go first. So I'm going to comment out the service collection one, right? If I go take that DLL from the bin directory, copy it in, we should see that this works. What I'm going to do now is add those DLLs. So let's go do that. So we get this stuff added in here. Great. Now if I go run this, again, I didn't change any of this code. I did not touch our core application. I've just added the plugin binaries. If I go run this code, we should see that we get from Autofac, right? So this is how you would go make an Autofac plugin with assembly scanning. And let's close that off. Now let's go make sure we can do the same thing with service collection. So we do need to go copy those DLLs in again, and we'll go run it. I've gone ahead and dropped the DLLs in. Again, this code for the service collection has not been touched. This is the exact same as we saw before, but we should get the output that we want, right? So Scrutor was able to go do the assembly scanning, find the type that we're interested in, and go get that IMyService to run it. To summarize what we've seen here, it's two different frameworks, right? Autofac on its own, which leverages assembly scanning and has this concept of modules. And then we saw IServiceCollection, which does not have assembly scanning built in, but Scrutor does enable that for us. So if you use this NuGet package alongside IServiceCollection, you can get assembly scanning. When we look at the code for both of these, they're very, very similar with respect to how they operate. If we get into the pros and the cons here, I would say that Scrutor sort of gets you this global way that you want to go do your registrations. So for example, I'm telling the application that I want to register everything in this particular way. That means there's no granular registration. I'm just saying grab it all, get all the classes, register every single class as itself and an interface, and they're all going to be singletons. You might not want that. You might not want that because you may want to do some things just as classes, some things just as interfaces, some things you might not want to have as singletons. If you needed that kind of separation, you'd have to go either break apart your assembly scanning and have your core application know about how you want that to work, which in my opinion kind of defeats some of the things that we were looking at, but that's how you would need to approach it with Scrutor if you needed that capability. However, if we think about Autofac and what we're getting with Autofac, we are making a different trade, and that is that every plugin that needs to work with Autofac also needs to depend on Autofac. That can be kind of messy because you may say like, hey, look, I don't want to enforce that everyone who makes a plugin for my application, maybe you have third-party plugins that you're trying to have supported, and if everyone has to use Autofac, you might not like that. Having that as a dependency is one thing. It also meant that we had to go make a module, and in my opinion, this is nice and also not nice, right? It's nice because you can have explicit registrations. You're saying for every type that you're interested in making, let me define how I'd like it to be used. That can be good because you get the granularity, but also kinda crappy because you have to go manually register everything. It also means that you have to have this whole other class, whereas with Scrutor, we didn't have that. This was the only thing that we needed. Between these two things, we are looking at pros and cons. I would say for almost everything that I'm building, truly, this pattern here with Scrutor actually fits a lot better. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments what your experience is with either of these approaches. If you find that the Scrutor way just gives you everything you need out of the box, if you find Autofac is something you've leaned on like I have in the past, or if you're doing something completely different. I would love to hear about it. If you thought this was interesting and you want to see how you can use dependency injection to go build modular ASP.NET Core applications, you can check out this video next. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.